It is time to make network and security simpler and more flexible. Ariaka helps enterprises modernize, optimize, and transform their network and security experience with Ariaka Unified SASE as a Service, the only solution that delivers performance, agility, simplicity, and security without trade-offs. Ariaka Unified SASE as a Service is a purpose-built, cloud-based offering that securely connects users and applications anywhere in the world. Visit securityweekly.com/Ariaka, that's Aryaka, to learn more. Global enterprises rely on Savient's Identity Cloud for unparalleled visibility and control over every single human and machine identity. Enterprises can better secure business processes, enable digital operations, and empower everyone who works for them and with them. Savient provides right time, right level access to the digital technologies and tools they need to do their best work. Visit securityweekly.com/Savient to schedule a demo. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Sounil Yu joins us today to talk about his new startup, Knostic. Sounil is the CTO and co-founder of Knostic. Previously, he was the CISO at Jupiter One and Bank of America's chief security scientist. He is the creator of the Cyber Defense Matrix and the DIE Triad. Welcome to the show, Sounil.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, always great to have you on. Always interesting to pick your brain, see what you're into, and it was really cool that you started a startup, and not disappointed with the direction you went in. Seems very ambitious, very exciting, and apparently others agree with me on this because you went through the Black Hats, what do they call it? Startup Spotlight.
Yes, Startup Spotlight, yes.
Which it seems very similar, except for the number of finalists to the RSA Innovation Sandbox.
Yep, that's right. And we also had the privilege of being one of the three finalists for RSA Launchpad. And apparently there's not really a declared winner there. Pretty much if you become a finalist for that, you're one of the winners. It's kind of like a participation award, maybe. But that said, so to be honored in both the RSA Launchpad as well as the winner of the Black Hat Startup Competition, I think is pretty good validation, if you will.
So when I was at Valence, I had the exciting opportunity to prep our speech for Innovation Sandbox for my CEO to go up there. I felt like we did a pretty good job, but having been involved in that process, I'm kind of interested about what this process and experience was like for you.
Sure, it's definitely a whole level of intensity and an experience when it's timed and you have a very short time frame. I've spoken in many different venues, and I'm not at all uncomfortable in large crowds, but having a 5-minute time frame and really kind of making sure that you can squeeze everything in that time frame is pretty intense. Innovation Sandbox, so I have 5 minutes. Innovation Sandbox, you only have 3 minutes. So I can imagine that's even more pressure there. So you really have to rehearse and to know exactly what you're going to say, and it has to go flawless. Unfortunately for me, it didn't go flawless. It actually.
You didn't make it?
No, it was, oh my God. It was one, I knew benchmarks of like, okay, am I on track or am I running out of time? And I know that at one point I'm running out of time, and I had already budgeted 4.5 minutes, right? So I knew I was under time and I was already going past time. And then I flubbed a video towards the end and lost time on top of that. So, but that said, the message that I got back from some of the judges was the message that what we're working on was pretty clear. The problem was very clear, and hopefully your listeners will be able to see that too or hear that too.
Yeah, I've watched literally, I think just about every single Innovation Sandbox presentation. It's been my favorite event for a while. So I've seen some rough ones. You know, I've seen some where you get to the end and they don't quite make the buzzer. But yeah, it's a big difference if you understand what they're doing and they don't make it to the end. You know, like it's easy to forgive. You know, I didn't make the buzzer when the message is really clear. But there's some of them where they didn't make the buzzer, and I have
Oh,
no idea what the company does.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
Yes.
3 minutes did not help whatsoever, right?
yeah. And
Yeah,
honestly, I think 5 is worse than 3 because I mean, you're tempted to put so much more in there. Like I would rather have less time than more, personally.
Well, I guess that's a 3 minutes you can kind of do in a elevator pitch where you have a lot of stops.
Hmm.
5 minutes, yes. Now, but the thing with the 5 minutes is it gave us time to do a demo, and of course, there's
Oh
no
wow,
way
okay.
you should never do a demo live. You should always video it, make sure that it goes smoothly. My problem in doing the demo is that something happened. I clicked once more or something,
Even the
and it
video didn't go smoothly.
it didn't go smoothly. I'm like, no. So yes. Anyway, that was. But yes, being able to do a demo is really what the 5 minutes gives you, and yeah, yeah.
Sorry, you're saying, Katie.
I was just going to say it's a totally different skill set to do something, whether it's 3 or 5 minutes, or give a
Hmm.
45-minute, 60-minute talk. And
Right.
so that must be hard to switch because you have so much more leeway and you can have more interactivity. Obviously, if you're in front of a bigger audience, you can feed off the crowd. Whereas, in RSA or Black Hat, either of those startup competitions, you have to almost block them out. Is that how you felt a little bit?
Yeah, but actually blocking them out wasn't as much of a problem. Although, hold on, wait. First of all, let's just be clear. I ran out of time, so maybe it was a problem. Okay.
Well, you still
Um,
won, so not that big of a problem, right?
apparently
Right.
not. But I got a lot of advice about what to do, and one of the I think what was there were a couple perspectives I thought were really useful. One is that, of course, you have to rehearse, but you don't want to sound rehearsed. And
Mhm.
if you sound rehearsed, then that means you need to actually rehearse more, so it becomes much more natural. And fortunately for me, a lot of the content that I was sharing was not rehearsed in the sense that I was rehearsing for it, but rather it's stuff that I talk about normally. And so
Yeah.
it was very natural. I think when I was on stage, I went slower in describing what we're doing just because I went into my natural mode versus my rehearsed or in my head mode where I'm actually talking a lot faster. And so hearing yourself talk and to actually do it, ideally in front of a test audience, really gives you the real timing that you may not
Yeah.
get if you just do it in a rehearsal mode, in your own head. So anyway, that's something that just this notion of rehearsing to the point where it doesn't feel rehearsed anymore becomes natural is really where you want to be. But that takes a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of practice. Yeah, and I actually use a mix of both in this show, right? Like I write a script for the intros and outros because I want them to be clean, snappy, quick, because that's not the core content. So like when you get to the part where here's our investors, here's how much money we raise, here's the key people in the company. Like I don't care if that sounds rehearsed because that's just stuff that has to be there, right? For you to
Yes,
have the full context.
that's right.
So yeah, maybe a mix of both can help there.
Wha-
But
One other one other thing I remember a
sure.
long time ago, and the Katie kind of hit upon this earlier. I remember this quote from a speaker who said, "Okay, they were negotiating a speaking contract, and they asked, well, how much time do I have?" And they said, "Oh, you have an hour." Okay, so then my fee is I'm making this up, and I'll give you a
Right.
low about number just so you can anyway. So my fee is $100. Let's say. Okay. Um, wow, that's a lot. What if we cover it down to 30 minutes? Oh, if it's 20 minutes, then my fee is $400. Whoa, wait. What if I only have 15 minutes? Oh, then
Yeah.
that's like $5,000. I'm like, okay. But anyway,
Yeah.
but point is, it actually is that much more work to squeeze it
Yeah.
down to something that's as tight as it needs to be.
Yep. Yeah, and it's not just what you're saying, but you've got visual content, that you have to map along with what you're saying as well. So
Yeah.
adding a deck to the mix and animations, and you
Mhm.
pre-recorded a demo and the video of that demo. Yeah,
It's a real
it's a
production.
lot. Yeah. Yeah, so some interesting competition there. Yeah, looking at Leak Signal, I feel like they're almost like taking the opposite bet that you guys are. Like doing more compartmentalization of data, things like that. So I think it's super interesting seeing two companies in the same competition approaching a problem from different extremes, maybe.
Yes. And I think I don't know if that well, hopefully they came right after me, I think, and it was kind of interesting, hopefully, to see the contrast. And
Mhm.
I don't know if I were this is me, but if I were coming after somebody who is basically presented a view that was contrary to the one that I'm about to
Yeah,
present, that would throw me off. In fact, I would feel like I would need to address it, right, and say, well, this person said this way. Well, let me give you a different perspective, but
right.
it has to be again equally convincing. So anyway, that I can imagine that some of the challenges of having to come after somebody who has presented one view, and then you have to go and counteract that in the 5 minutes that you have. So
Yeah, I think whoever decided on the finalists, if that was part of the thinking, that was super smart. I think putting two vendors who are kind of taking two sides of the same coin.
Or super sadistic, right?
Yeah.
One or the other,
Hey,
like, oh, I'm really
there.
going to mess with these people.
I mean,
You know,
this is modeled after a show that is entertainment. So that I mean, how do you
sure.
improve entertainment? You introduce some drama. You introduce some tension. Yeah. So yeah, James Wickett up there also with his startup. So some tough competition there that you won over as well.
Yeah, yeah, and James he's pretty credible in what he's doing with Dry Run as well. Um, yeah, I can give commentary on what I thought he did well and didn't do well, but that's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm getting. There was some I forget who posted an article about this, but they talked about how the Innovation Sandbox finalists, they all were not all of them, but many of them were really successful because of the spotlight that they got, whether regardless of whether they won
Yeah,
or not. And I hope that that's well, I mean,
it
this
really
is
does help.
self-serving.
Yeah,
Uh, I hope that's the same sort of outcome for those who made it as finalists for the Black Hat competition as well. There were hundreds of companies that applied for this thing, and so just to be able to down select to four means that even though they may not have won, they were still really compelling capabilities for consideration.
yeah. From putting my marketing hat on, I would take being in one of these competitions over buying a booth on the floor any day.
Oh, so this was a surprise, but getting in as a finalist meant that we got a booth, a
Yeah.
free booth. At which point I was like, "What am I
Was it
going to
for
do
the
with this?"
whole thing or just for one day?
Oh, for 2 days
For two
for
days.
the 2 days that the business hall at Black Hat is
Okay.
open. But
Because the
that
Innovation Sandbox, you get the free booth, but only for the duration of Innovation Sandbox.
oh, that's
Mhm.
interesting. You don't get the startup area later on, I
Nope.
guess, huh? Well, we get it for at least for the conference time frame. But that for us introduced another problem, which is it meant that we had to staff a booth. We had to like actually be there the whole time and make it look pretty and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
which um,
More work.
more work.
More
Yes,
planning. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, and
startup
then
woes.
you get an interview with an Omdia analyst, something like that. There's some other perks in there as well.
Yes, so we had a chance to talk to Rick over at Namdia.
Rick
Unfortunately,
Turner.
Rick Turner, yes, and he and I know each other decently well, so it
Hmm.
was a very fun and friendly conversation.
Very cool. So yeah, let's jump over to your company. So Gnostic, the name sounds like agnostic. That's probably not a coincidence.
Well, so not the word Gnostic is a
Hmm.
Greek word for knowledge or pertaining to knowledge.
Oh, okay,
So yeah, and
gotcha.
but there's a ton of play on words that come into that. You'll see why
Yeah,
that word is appropriate.
and I love the shirt too. Like that's if you Gnostic, you know.
Well, when we were in stealth, it worked.
Right,
Like they would ask you, "What do you do?" And well, if you know, you know, right?
right.
And then what Gnostic does is all about if you know, you know.
Knowledge. Right, right. So it still works. Yeah,
It works in three different ways. Yes,
yeah. It
and
works on different levels. Yeah, I
yes.
like it.
So, what
Um,
does Gnostic do for our listeners and watchers who don't
yeah, yeah.
know what you know?
So the main problem that we're seeing happen is emerges when people roll out enterprise large language models for the purposes of enterprise search. We think that's a killer use case, and they're doing it because they want to be able to share institutional knowledge across the organization. Right now, many organizations have an undersharing problem, where it's really hard to find things that you need to find. You go on SharePoint and you search,
Mhm.
and instead of getting the answer you want, you just get a whole bunch of links, and it just takes you time to go through and find those links, right? Or to find what you're looking for. But tools like Copilot really change that, because now you actually get a direct answer, and hopefully the answer is meaningful too, right? But the point is that you get an answer. The challenge is that sometimes you could also ask questions like, "Hey, are we going to have layoffs soon?" Or "What's next quarter's M&A?" Or I'm sorry, "What's next quarter's sales revenue?" Or "Is there an M&A due diligence coming up?" And these are things that not everyone has a need to know for. And so what we do is we create the need to know controls that ensure that only the right people get access to the content that they're supposed to get to, and are blocked from things that they're not.
Shouldn't that be a control that's built into an intranet, a share drive? Seems to
That's right.
me like that should be part and parcel. I can think of several issues with that, but um, can you explain them from your point of view? Where does that discrepancy come in? Because I feel like, all right, I'm not part of the finance team. I don't need to know the details of M&A. Could I look it up if I'm nosy? Sure. But I feel like those
Mhm.
controls should be there. So if you could help us understand, where are the glitches, where are the back doors?
Sure. Well, you actually kind of hinted at it, which is that they should be there, right?
Mhm.
And there's a
Are
presumption that
they? Yeah.
that's right. So, how many of y'all found a salary spreadsheet put into the wrong folder that is shared with
So,
everyone, right?
so I was on, if I can just jump in with a quick anecdote, I was on an IANS call the other day and we were talking about adversarial prompting and they were testing out Copilot. And so the guy started typing in adversarial prompts. And right in the middle of that Ask an Expert call, he found a file with plain text passwords in it because he just went to Copilot and said, "Show me files with passwords in them." And boom, here's a file, and it was like a JDBC ODBC file that had like all the database names, IP addresses, host names, usernames, passwords that applications need to log into those things.
There's
So
a
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of latent risk that is waiting to be discovered, and a lot of us just don't know it's there because we just don't have the time to look for it, right?
Mhm.
But tools like Copilot accelerate our discovery, accelerate the velocity of discovering that risk, and essentially that's what either attackers or insiders, or not even anyone in malicious, you could just ask an innocent question and end up with
Right.
sensitive data, because oftentimes the permission structures are not actually correct.
Yep.
So to Katie, your point earlier, you're correct that that's a basic thing that we should expect to have been put in place: data protections, as well as information classification, and those sort of practices that we all hope to do. But as we know, for many organizations, we just haven't put the time and energy into doing that. And so, if you start rolling out Copilot, immediately these sort of things surface, and they uncover things that are not necessarily that are going to cause harm to the business.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's and just to kind of level set for people, the way Copilot works today is it just uses whatever permissions the user has,
That's
right?
right.
Like it just if you have access to it, it has access to it. But yeah,
That's right.
again, once you jump into SharePoint, OneDrive, like there's so many ways for things to be shared with you and to get access to things. It's I I'd say pretty much any company of any decent size has probably some serious data hygiene and governance problems.
Yes. And so one of the things I showed at during the startup competition is a way to think about the problem in a more uh, s- uh, conceptual way. And for those who know me, I think in models. And so I shared this particular model that I thought was really helpful. The model is called the DIKW pyramid. It stands for data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And what we've seen is a progression of technologies that have moved us up the stack. Where I would argue, if you're embracing technologies like AI, if you're embracing technologies like ChatGPT and Copilot, what you're really trying to do is become a knowledge driven organization. Now, one of the challenges that we have is just putting our arms around this thing called AI. Well, what I discovered using this model was actually the problem space that we're talking about with Gnostic. What I discovered is, using this model, I can anticipate the future and plan out like what the shape of the future looks like. because we know the problem space for data. We know the problem space for information. The problem space includes things like data security or data privacy or data quality. Well, those suffixes, when you apply it to information, it still works for most of those pairings. So now you put those pairings on knowledge, and all of a sudden you see the shape of the future. Knowledge security, knowledge privacy, knowledge quality, knowledge governance, knowledge management, knowledge engineering, all these different word pairings that we know with data and information. Now, you look at those word pairings and you're like, okay, well, what exactly does knowledge quality mean, for example? Well, let me offer a knowledge quality problem would be like hallucinations. Now, if you're looking at something like hallucinations, saying, okay, I've never seen this before, what do I do with it? You may struggle to figure out what to do. But if I said that's a knowledge quality problem, you can then say, okay, well, what were the governance routines we had with data quality? What were the roles and responsibilities? What are the controls? Which of these roll forward to tackle the problem of knowledge quality or hallucinations? And it turns out a lot of these patterns do follow, and we can apply, for example, the same kind of governance routines or the same kind of roles and responsibilities. And the general kind of controls remain the same, but the actual technical implementation of the controls change. And so that's what we did with knowledge security. What exactly is knowledge security? Well, the problem that I mentioned earlier, where you want to share institutional knowledge, but you want to gate access to sensitive business content, that's a knowledge security problem. And we said, okay, now how do we tackle that? The patterns that we saw in the data and information space gives us a sense of how to tackle it. And one of the major ways that we look at security is, of course, access control. How do we apply access control? And moreover, what is the fundamental basis for how we apply access control? At the data and information layer, the way that we apply access controls at the data layer is through specific file level access. Okay. And again, we talked earlier, that's not always correct. Okay. At the information layer, the type of controls we put there is classification. We put these labels of like confidential, proprietary, whatever else it might be. So what's the basis for the type of control at the knowledge layer? We know we need access controls, but what's the foundation for it? And our perspective is the foundation for it is understanding each person's need to know. And so that's what Gnostic is all about. We're characterizing each person's need to know, each role's need to know, and to be able to characterize that so that we can say, for this particular person or role, these are the different types of topics that they have a need to know for, or that they don't have a need to know for.
So the example I like to give here is somebody doing an audit of salary fairness, something like that, like across different jobs with the same functions or discrepancy, something like that, where they don't need to know the individual salaries of individual employees, but maybe once you run it on geolocation, on gender, on different things, like they can pull that data, get that data. But whatever produces that report needs access to the actual numbers to be able to do the arithmetic, do the crunching. Um, so I guess the question is, like, that's a very specific use case. So how do you start to build this build out and figure out this kind of least privilege need to know model?
Sure. So let me offer, again, for those who know me, I think of the world through analogies, and the analogies help us find these patterns and see how we can tackle what seems to be really hard problems for which we don't know if we have a solution or approach for. So, Adrian, you brought up a question that I don't know if I can answer directly yet, but I'll answer through an analogy. Okay. Okay. So, we all know we have a problem with networks being flat. So, we introduce network segmentation, and with the segmentation, we can create these boundaries for the network. When you roll out a large language model, our knowledge becomes flat, which is great from a sharing of institutional knowledge, right?
Mhm.
But potentially very dangerous when it comes to oversharing. So, what do we need? We need knowledge segmentation. Okay. Now, how do we go about doing network segmentation? What's our very first step? for network segmentation. The very first step for most people is to actually look at, let's say, things like NetFlow and see, okay, where are people actually talking? Where are they going? And from
Right.
that, you can characterize what are the boundaries for network segmentation. Well, we're doing something similar on the knowledge side. We're doing knowledge flows. We're looking at what are the existing topics that go to different people. We can get that from DLP. We can get that from the actual questions they ask, and so on and so forth. But we can also do that proactively. We can proactively go through Copilot and ask questions that help us understand what the knowledge boundaries are, what the knowledge segmentation is, and then determine whether these are correct. Okay. So hopefully you follow in terms of the analogy. But now let me get to the heart of your question, which is there's a lot of nuance and a lot of little aspects of how we do business. How do we intend on characterizing this at a level that will actually help us manage this appropriately? And I would say, let me use the analogy of the network again. And I would say there are things that if you try to manage a network with rules at a /32 level, you would have an enormously difficult time managing all those different rules because it's just too many different pairings that you have to worry about. So what do we do in the network side? We aggregate. Instead of doing a /32, we do a /24 or /16 or /8, whatever it might be. So to give you an example, to walk through your example, HR, just topics around HR could be a /8. Topics around salaries or compensation can be like a /16. Topics around salary equity or whatever else it might be could be some deeper variation of that. But the point is that we don't have to necessarily we can start at a level that is manageable first and work our way down, where the topics that as they get very granular, you may have different type of control. You may have different policies on how you enact those controls. So let me
Gotcha.
let me use a different example.
So take like a use case at a time type of thing.
Take a use case at a time and go through the sequence of saying how nuanced or detailed do we want to be, and how many of those do you want, because we just cannot manage /32s across a very large complex environment. You can in smaller amounts, but you can't do that for everything that's out there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and kind of shifting to how this is implemented architecturally, like we've seen a lot of LLM firewalls, for lack of a better term, out there.
Yep.
Kind of sit in between the prompting and between the output, making sure that the prompt isn't prompt injection, it's not malicious, it's not, making sure it's something you're okay with going to your LLM, and then making sure the output is appropriate. It doesn't include any sensitive data, doesn't tell you how to make a bomb, all the AI safety stuff that we're actually going to be talking about here in a little bit with Amanda Minnick, with our other interview. And or actually, so the way people are going to see this, we've already talked to Amanda, so we've already covered all that. Sorry. But yeah, so obviously latency is a concern. Yeah, if you're somewhere in the middle of that question answer stack, and yeah, how is what you're doing different from some of these others that I've seen some that use like Google Chrome plugins. There's different ways of putting yourself in the middle there. So how much of a challenge has that been, and how do you deal with those challenges?
Sure. So first of all, I don't want to be in the middle as much as possible. In fact, I would rather not be in the middle at all, because there already exist things in the middle.
Right.
And the way to describe that is there are many LLM architectures that include these sort of filters. And I'll talk about two specific filters. This is actually best seen in Amazon Q's LLM data flow. They have an architectural diagram about this. But they have two filters. One is called a toxicity filter, and the other one's called a topic filter. And you may wonder, what's the difference, right? So a toxicity filter, I would argue, is about human harm. How do I avoid human harm? Now, we're all humans, so you could argue that's a universal filter. You could apply a universal filter that addresses toxicity and have that apply to any model, any use case, whatever else it might be. So these are guardrails around, let's say, for example, maybe, I don't know if I would argue that how to avoid making a biological weapon or bomb is one of those things, but we can say, for example, don't give bad medical advice is one that you could apply generally to
Yeah.
Anybody. Okay. A topic filter, on the other hand, is about business harm. And that is something that is not one size fits all. That is something that you do actually, some people do have a need to know for these things. Some people do actually have a need to know how to build a bomb. Okay. Some people do have a need to know how to build biological weapons. It really, now it should be hopefully very few, but the point is that there are legitimate business reasons for certain topics to be shared with certain individuals. The question is, what's going to define those rules, or who's going to define those rules? And what Gnostic is offering is a capability to both define and manage those rules. But what you were also asking was, who's going to go and enforce those rules?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I'm saying, there's already either vendors like AI firewalls out there to enforce those rules, or it's being built into the architecture itself. Okay,
Right.
and if you think about the microsegmentation, network microsegmentation efforts that we saw back, and that's still ongoing, I guess. But if you think about the firewall that was used, the firewall is just the built-in network firewall that it was a packet filter that was already part of the OS, right? There's nothing special about the firewall, but who's going to supply the rules for those firewalls? And that's what those vendors were focused on. That's similarly what we're doing as well. We're providing a way to manage and apply those rules, but the actual enforcement may happen by either the provider of the LLM or through these through these third-party firewalls as well. Let me also offer one other piece as well. So we're talking about it in the context of enterprise search, but
Mm-hmm.
this need to know problem is going to be pervasive. It's not just in enterprise search, it's going to be with every SaaS application that has an LLM component in it. They
Mm-hmm.
will all have a need to know problem. Even worse, we have all these agents that operate on via LLMs, okay? And each of those are going to have need to know problems as well. So how do we ensure that these different systems have a uniform set of rules around what is the appropriate
Right.
need to know across all these different places? Do you want to set it up in individual places, or do you want to have one place where that can be defined?
One policy engine you can plug into all of those.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, it makes sense. So before we wrap here, Sunil, where's the company at? Like, what stage are you at right now? Are you selling to customers? Are you looking for design partners? Like, is there an MVP built? And what's next?
Yeah, so uh, we have we have more than enough design partners at this point, and we're doing paid POCs exclusively at this point for anybody who wants to do a POC. I can't say we have ARR at this point because it's
Hmm.
ARR is different than POC money. But if anyone is deploying Copilot, then that's been our go-to-market. It's the easiest, or Glean for that matter, Copilot or Glean. That's been our easiest repeatable go-to-market motion, and we provide that initial visibility that I mentioned in terms of what your knowledge environment looks like, and then that helps customers go quickly through and clean up some of the messes. But moreover, the process helps us actually start defining what that need to know boundary is. And that's really the ultimate goal that we have. We were trying to define need to know boundaries for the organization to understand what is safe to share, what is responsible to share, what is ethical to share. And I
Hmm.
use those words because, to your point earlier, those are words that we apply to AI safety as well. And
Right.
my much longer term goal is, can we use this as a way to benchmark our understanding of what each organization believes to be safe, ethical, and responsible when it comes to AI as well?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be really interesting. So you're going to be gathering this data, and yeah, hopefully there is. It's not. I always call it the customization tax, right? You build a product, and then how much the customer has to do before they can use it, before they get value out of it. Yeah. Hopefully it's not. I wouldn't imagine it would be completely different for every company. But
It's pretty fast. The proof of
yeah,
value is actually really fast for what we do. So
that's good. It's good to hear. All right. So Neil, thank you so much for taking time out of Black Hat and DEF CON to come talk to us. And thanks for joining us on Enterprise Weekly, Security Weekly today.
thanks for having me.
All right. We'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.